Thank you so much for joining. My name is Havard Ostgaard. So I'm the Director of Botanical Solutions at Species 360. Some of you may know me from Botanical Software. So we joined Species 360 in December. We'll talk a bit more about that. Together with me, we have Dr. Waheed Arshad.
Everyone, I've been working with Havard for the last 2 or 3 years. And my background is very much with botanic gardens and research, primarily, but very excited by this venture and helping the community gardens.
Yeah, so this presentation is sort of generic. We obviously work on Hortis, as many of you might know. So we're going to put a bit of aspect around Hortis, but this is more of a generic talk, and it's or discussion. So we want your input as well. So, but before we start, we are running this on Menti. So we're going to do. So if you scan that QR code, you get the slides, but then you can also participate on. We're going to do at least one bit of a sort of questionnaire with all of you. So give everybody a few minutes. And also, if, like me, always forget my glasses and you're back there, you can then see the slides on your phone as we go through it. So that's also quite a nice little bonus. Yeah, so obviously, our sort of mission is, of course, to, well, I'm saying, of course, a lot here, sorry. Our mission is to help you to reach your mission as an institution, and plant records can play a very important part. And these kind of discussions we have with the community at very high intervals, because we want to learn basically what you're struggling with. So this is our sort of interpretation of what we've learned so far. We might learn more today, hopefully, and so we'll see how you sort of what your take is on our sort of summary here. I think, does anybody have difficulties? Gabriela. Oh, are we? Oh, it's a bit of a. We're putting pressure on the Wi-Fi here. Sorry, maybe on behalf of Omni. No, okay. So I'll let it. But if you scanned it, then it will probably show up quite soon. So
you should be able to see that screen, basically.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get on with it. So we're going to do one poll just to get a sense of where you are in sort of the world of plant records. So if you can tell us how satisfied you are with your current plant records. We've done these kind of surveys before, and there was a really good survey at the Botanic Gardens of Australia and New Zealand, where also let's see if we can match that score. We'll see. We'll let this run for a few minutes or a minute or something to let you have a think. Yeah.
It's taking data from us right now.
Yeah. This is the live data of the group here. So if you want to help the, but we can see which is sort of quite common. You know, like half of the population typically are dissatisfied or very dissatisfied, and there are all kinds of complex reasons to that. It could be, it's a combination of people and technology typically, and you know, all the things, all the constraints that prevents you from doing or getting where you want to go, and so that's what we're talking about today. How do we help you all guys to move over to the blue point of being very satisfied one way or another? So that's really helpful. There's one very satisfied, which is great. So was that you, Waheed? Okay. So first we'll talk a bit about who we are. So we started Botanical Software almost 15 years ago. This is my 11th time at the conference here, and been looking at developing solutions for this community for many years. We joined Species 360 in December. So Species 360 was founded almost 5 decades ago to serve the zoos and aquariums in the world. So Species 360 has a product called ZIMS, which helps, it's basically animal records. So we're doing the same thing for plants and animals. So in December, they extended the mission to include flora, fauna, and flora. So now we have zebras and monkeys in sweet harmony. So, so even though you see the very much aligned or linked to conservation, but we in terms of plant records, we define conservation as quite a broad definition. If you have plants, in general, all plants we want to conserve in one way or another. So even though you might have a garden that doesn't have conservation as part of your mission, we think that it might have a conservation, your plants still might have conservation potential. And that's very important, that everybody allowed to, and make it easier for you to capture that information, because it can be very valuable in the future. We don't know. So that's who we are. And this is also probably stipulates very much our motivation of rethinking plant records. In the world of botanic gardens, over 80% struggle with or have spreadsheets or other types of solutions. So it's quite a sort of a serious problem. And you can imagine when you have these kind of global conservation efforts, there's actually a big black hole of what is found in ex situ collections. We only know what is sort of in that small percentage. And that is quite a big problem. And of course, these gardens who don't have a proper system, they might struggle to actually utilize these records for mission-driven kind of work. So that's what we're going to talk a bit about. So it's not a point in itself to get a computerized system. It's more a point of lifting your records so you can use them for something more than just an inventory. So we're going to talk about that. Let's also take the time to mention here that the Botanic Gardens of Australia and New Zealand, they went through a tender process and they picked Hortis as their preferred record keeping system. Based on these kind of discussion they saw in their garden, that it was a big problem, and they did a survey and they decided that it would be beneficial for them all to have a system. And that's how we sort of won that tender. So we have quite a nice group of gardens already using Hortis. The first one logged in December 2021. So we've been running for 16 months on this platform without a single minute of downtime, which is quite good. So if you look here as well, this is quite a problem, especially when you see these kind of biodiversity hotspots, where these are where the botanic gardens are, and then you see and of course the knowledge of what is in these collections is maybe in the heads of garden managers, and anyway, it's not shared with many people. So before we go into the sort of the crux of the talk, just to talk a bit about Hortis. So our sort of strategy here is to rethink plant records, because we know that many of you struggle for one reason or another. And one typical thing is that if you have a spreadsheet or something, it's in the office. The things happen in the garden or elsewhere. So allowing to have a product that you can use wherever you are is very important. So Hortis works on anything that has a browser. Maybe not the watch, if you have but any sort of smartphone, tablet, doesn't matter. There's no installation. So we want to make it really easy for you to get going with your plant records. And the second thing that is on our strategy, but it's a little bit basic now, but allowing you to, because it's cloud-based, it opens up opportunities for us to collaborate with other colleagues, etc. So the platform is ready for that. There are some basic features around that already. And as I mentioned, the cloud product means when you buy the subscription, you don't have to think about anything else. You know, there's no, oh, I need to call IT and need to install things. All those kind of things are sort of non-problematic.
In the previous slide, you referenced hotspots. What?
Well, that was meant biodiversity hotspots, as in here is you know, in Australia there's you know, these are the biodiversity hotspots. These are where you have botanic gardens. So it's quite a big discrepancy of where you have good collections and where you have a huge biodiversity. So that was the point there. And but I also went to, one thing that people often ask about cloud products is the security aspect. And we spent a tremendous amount of resources on that. I just have a dialogue with this if you're concerned. We've gone through a vetting process with quite high profile clients. So yeah, it's arguably more secure than your own network typically, because when you build a cloud platform, it's very, very important to secure that very thoroughly. So the last thing on point here is light yet powerful, or making experts and beginners feel at home. And we use a software designer. We're in our industry the only one who does that, and hopefully that shines through with the product. That means that we design everything first before we build it, and we have a very tight dialogue with all our users and make sure that the sort of usage path is very smooth. So why do I mention that? Well, because this problem is quite complex, and it's very easy to say, oh, we do this, that, and before you know it, it's a monster that nobody can use, or it's very complicated. So we're going to stick to this. So when you hear that, okay, the product is growing, we're going to sort of service bigger and bigger and more complex gardens, the product will stay light and be focused on what is your needs as a garden, so that you don't get, oh, what's this? I don't need that. So that's our strategy. So that small gardens with few resources can just keep on using it. And at the bottom, we want to elevate the plant record so you can actually use it as a strategic tool. And that's a bit, if you can't rely on your records, you can only use it for, I don't know, print it out and say, this is what we think we have. We want to push it up here so that it becomes part of the institutional tool that everybody knows and can rely on. So let's see if we can manage that. We put this slide up. This is a result of a discussion we had with a similar setting. We thought we wouldn't do it again, but these are one of the biggest challenges people have today. And maybe there's somebody who has something to share here, but what we found is the most common problem that people have is lack of time. They have so many things, there's stress about looking after the garden. I have my own garden. I know there's always something to be done out there. So why do you do plant records? No, we need to weed or whatever. So time is typically one, funding, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts. What comes to mind? What is the biggest challenge for you to get into your plant records as a sort of to work on them? Is it time? Is it other things? Funding?
I think it's the interaction between the people.
Exactly. Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah, we get into that. That's a very common thing. Yeah, I don't know if you heard that. So there's the interaction with the people in the field and the person or the people in charge of plant records. There's typically we call that inventory gap. It's a good term to sort of thinking, how far are you from the truth in terms of in your records and what's out in the garden? And we obviously want to reduce that or keep it down to zero. I don't know if that's possible, but we'll see, maybe with modern technology. So these are, as of to date, our top tips. So we're going to go through all 6 of them, and we're going to maybe have some discussions. People might share some experience themselves. The first one, well, they're not all the first. I think our numbering went a bit crazy at the here. First one, mission-driven record keeping, and then what Liz mentioned, allowing people to engage in the plant record process, democratized record keeping. Look at your workflows, something we call smart inventorying, and then the idea of doing continuous improvement. I think this is more like a philosophical way of how you run your business, but it's relevant here, we think so. And then We are then also going to end talking a bit about what we look at, what is healthy plant records? What does that look like? So it's not a quote from Shakespeare, but almost. So what to record and what not to record? That is the question. And it's a big question. And I think many gardens struggle with that particular question because they may not, as a entity of staff, have it sort of, why do we have records in the first place? What is the purpose of this particular plant in the context of our garden? And so if you look at this sort of, your garden has a mission, you know, it might be a heritage garden. There's some good examples of, I know, national or English heritage, they have the garden of Darwin. You know, their purpose is to make sure that they represent what Darwin had in his garden at the point when he was there. So that's very different from many of you that might have an educational mission, etc. And of course, being aware of that, put everything into context when you look at a plant coming in. Why do we have it here? And what is important? Is this an important plant or is it not in terms of what we're doing? You might get, you know, some books that say you're going to plant in front of the entrance just to look nice. You know, that's very different from sort of a threatened species that are, you know, you're one of two gardens in the United States who have it or something. So that's why this is important. And from that, many gardens, how many of you do have a collection policy? Don't be shy. Yeah, it's a good number. I think it was 50%, maybe. But it's quite common that, especially with smaller gardens, you know, but you might have a collection policy. So what is a collection policy? It's more of an awareness of, you have a mission, how do you reach your mission? Well, you build up a policy to improve the collection to reach your mission. So the collection policy could be written on a napkin, theoretically. So it doesn't need to be like a 6-year process. But of course, there are some very rigorous collection policies out there that you can find online if you want to be inspired and sort of go in more depth. But from that, you then get, and I use the word policy as well, which might sound a bit scary, but it's basically having an idea about how you're going to go about recording your data. Why? Again, going back to the Darwin example, you know, if there's plants coming in that are really critical to your mission, you put a lot of effort into making sure the data is accurate. Whereas if you maybe have a display of daffodils that's going to be just for show, you might not spend so much effort on it. You might want to have it in there because it's important from a horticultural perspective of running the operation, but you might not spend like lots of time on the nitty-gritty details. So that really helps you to, and then so the policy is more like a sort of mindset. It could be also written on a napkin, maybe 2 napkins now, but whatever. That so that there's awareness inside your institution. Why do we do this? And from our perspective, we haven't done so much, but long term, we really want to see how we can do that. So gardens can operate and see why, what, you know, help you in the tools to sort of harness that thing. We had some talks about a concept we called collection value scoring. We sort of haven't implemented that yet, but we're preparing for it, which means that you basically track the value of the individual records or plants based on the mission alignment. So you can then see this plant is very important, this is not, and then you can focus your effort in relation to that. If you have, did I say that? If you have questions, ask questions. Okay. And so what we're saying here, and understand how your records support your mission. And then, of course, think about it carefully as well, and then see how you can improve all your workflows. The last point here is be ambitious, but also be incremental. Don't sort of, you might sort of wear out everybody if you have this, you know, very ambitious thing and you tell all your colleagues and they get scared. So do it sort of incremental, so you can also not be afraid to fail, but then adjust as you go along. We're using this one, it's a term within our software industry. It's called yak shaving, which is the analogy is that be wary of starting to do something that is slightly complex, and you keep on looking at these complex things, and before you know it, you're working on something completely different than you should do. And that's more like yeah, so it's to help you to focus on going back to this one, really. You know, why are we doing things? Very important. I'm not sure what the origin of that term, but you can all picture that it's quite hard. You never finish it. So that's the idea. The next step, which relates to Liz's question, is we call it democratized record keeping. That sounds scary for quite a few. Maybe you should ask if how many of you have just one person is in charge of all the records and nobody else is involved? Others each string, yeah, it's quite a few of you. And that's very common, but that's a combination of, sometimes it's a combination of policy or sort of, oh, you're not sure about these people who don't, and they're not very tech savvy, so they're probably just going to mess it up or whatever. Or you have just spreadsheets and you share that with everybody, and before you know it, things go a bit pear-shaped. So, so this is a very good use case with Hortis. Waheed, maybe you could elaborate a bit. So
yeah, so one of the things that's very important to us at Species 260 is really to understand what gardens are looking for and what they're struggling with. So last year, APGA's conference, I spoke with the executive director at Turner Chun, which is a garden which some of you may know. It's in Arizona. And the director there explained some of the challenges that they were faced there. Basically, they didn't have any plant records. So they were part of the 80% that we saw earlier, who were kind of struggling with keeping good records. And so they also explained some of the challenges that they had in terms of growing the plants. You know, being in the desert, you have other environmental challenges to deal with, but they have very impressive collections. So they have some very important plant species of the region, like this night blue cactus, and also, you know, a lot of other kind of species that other gardens would be very much interested in learning more about, as well as the visitors. So one of the things that we kind of got talking is that a month later they decided to use Hortis, and they had about 45 volunteers all in the garden, all using Hortis at once, simultaneously, all on smartphones, tablets, and they were able to go from basically no plant record to a fully digitized inventory. So with mapping, the locations of their plants, as well as photographs. And it's a really great story, not only for them, but, you know, also the community, that it's very easy to do this with the right tools and technologies. So we had an interview with the executive director, Jamie, and it's you know, participation from everybody in the organisation. Chief and executive director, we had they had the greenhouse staff, they had volunteers, you know, all levels of participation. That's a really fantastic story that we urge you to you can read more about it. But another thing related to that that we think is very important in this area is, in Hortis we have a full audit log. So as part of that democratization, you know, we want to make it transparent for you as gardeners to know what changes have occurred to your collection records. And we do this by, it's a bit techy, but the topic is immutability. And that's just a word that we describe that every single change that's made to your records is stored as a new version. So you can go back throughout the course of your it's basically a time machine for your database. So you can see what changes have been made, by whom and when. And this is a very powerful tool over time to see how your collection evolved, and for you to be able to get more analytical insights and becoming more strategic with your record keeping. So just some of the applications there are revision, audit trail. So on every record, you can see those changes. Deletion and restoring, so nothing gets deleted. So everything is what we call soft delete, so things and data can be restored. So it's very kind of safe, you know, not too worried.
If you resurrect a plant, let's say you're doing inventory and you did something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's coming back next year. So can you see that in the report?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can you resurrect the plant?
I mean,
The plant record, you mean, not the plant itself?
Absolutely, yeah. So all of the, you know, if you did it or archive it, you accession it, you know, all of those kind of states, you could revert to, you know, a live state.
What we refer to here as well, we don't delete anything really. So everything is just archived. So it can be taken back, restored again if you made a mistake. And it's also there, more importantly, this is very helpful for, there's one side use case where you, some of you may use a system where you have quite a complex bed structure. And then you have beds that are no longer there but you need them because you want to see what kind of plants did you have in that bed 3 years ago. So with Hortis, we use the same technique. So when you delete a bed, you're basically archiving it and the historic data is there still. So your list of beds is very current, but there might be double the number of beds in the system in the background. So it does basically help you to curate your data and have a reliable time machine that can do analytics over time. So this is something very fundamental for many things we're going to do, and this is also from a cloud perspective, because it's on cloud. This is very theoretically resource intensive if you did it on any other type of product. But on the cloud, this. Sorry.
Can you apply your turn for previous version to a particular? So if you got democratized record keeping, 10 horticulturists working out in the collection, they're all working, but one of them is whatever revised there. Did that?
Not at the moment, but it's technically possible to achieve those things.
On trail is a very popular subject.
Yeah. So we this one of the simplest thing we can probably roll out at some point this year is just undo, which is quite a sweet thing in itself. You know, you can imagine if you click in Word and you type it, and then you click undo. That quite nice to have that on the whole record, and then revert those changes that Jonathan did or something. So yeah.
Related to that, something that we don't have yet, but this technology paves the way for it, is draft approval. So the ability for, you know, several people that you assign a certain permission level can sort of submit a draft to you, let's say, and you can then approve those drafts or reject them. And so this kind of democratization can have different levels to it. Some of those, like the draft approval and collection analytics, will get to roll out.
Just a side point as well, we already rolled that out over a year ago because we have been looking at the fundamentals of record keeping and trying to solve some of them. And this is one of the technically complicated things, but it's also very important to achieve the democratization process, but all the other aspects, analytics, and having the ability to track your collection over time. One side, I keep on talking about this because I'm very excited about it, but the one typical thing you might see is that if you run a report, say what is in your collection at some given point, and then you run the same report 2 years later, you typically get the different answer. That's what we want to avoid. So that if you want to see that you're doing the right thing over time, that you get reliable analytics over time as well. Amongst many other things we want to achieve. So
is all of this set up for just staff in an arboretum, or is it something, is there a version of it that then is available to attendees of the people visiting the garden?
That is definitely on our plans, and we plan to release the first iteration of that this year. So we're working on the sort of draw designs. If you see the product in action, we're not sure we can fit any demos here, but we'll be in the exhibit if anybody of you wants to come and have a look. And you can also, because we're already designing things to be, what should we say, consumer grade. We know that people don't have patience to sit there and think, and what's this, and then they stop doing things. So from a visitation perspective, the software, so that the tech stack we have, it runs on anything already. So definitely something we're going to do this year. And then I think almost want to do a survey here. How many would not like to have their collection shared with their visitors? That's 100%. Was a leading question, but so.
We do have a few things that we are very sensitive to.
Oh yes, absolutely. Oh yeah, we're very aware of that kind of, poachers and things that are in the nursery and so forth. Yeah, it's very, very yeah. So here's just an example for Hortis where you can our license model is also extremely flexible, as with the whole with Hortis show. There's a subscription for your full-time users, and then there's what we have flexible days. So it's basically mean that people log in and don't make changes. Those occasional users, they're free. You don't charge for them, but when they start to contribute, you basically use a day token, and it's about $3, so less than a cup of coffee. So it makes it very easy for you to have many people involved at certain points, and then not having to sort of buy a big license for 100 people or whatever. I don't know, this might be a slight exaggeration, but I don't know, how many of you have seen plant record instructions on Post-it notes? Maybe our people are embarrassed. It's not, I think it's very common, it's very practical. Paper is it's really great. It's a really great technology, but it has its limitations, and it can be a bit problematic. And this is one thing we're looking at in general is because you have your records only one place, which is in the office of the registrar or whatever, you have to do something, and that becomes like these kind of workflows. So tip number 3 is basically try to simplify your workflows. And this is where we also are really keen to work with the community to help the workflows to become fully digital. And why do this is only possible because we have a product that runs on anything. So you can be out there and use your phone. You can be on your way with a bus going home or something, or maybe not in the car. That's not recommended. Or you can speech to text. Hey Hortis, can you please? I don't know. I think these are tax returns. It doesn't matter. Some of you probably have maybe asked that as well. Do you have like forms that you fill out that staff needs to fill out? Yeah, and then they get lost or whatever. And some people have very interesting handwriting and all these kind of things. This is a journey with us as well. We definitely want to keep on looking at how we can improve to help you, not because digital in itself is really important, but just basically cut time. And more importantly, I don't know if you're familiar with the term forgetting curve, and that is the time. So when somebody gets a new accession or new plant material coming in, and if they can record it then and then it's fresh data from brain to fingers. Whereas if somebody tells them, oh, we got this new one coming in, and then somebody else, before you know it, data is lost and accuracy is lost over time. So these and it's costly. I mean, I'm sure all of you run their garden on a budget. That's a fixed budget. These people are given an annual salary, and that's a fee. But how much time do they spend on certain jobs? It's very important to get more stuff done within a certain amount of time. So these are the kind of things we want to help you with. So it runs on anything. That makes it possible for you to rethink how you actually run the garden. But that's of course very important that the product, everything is reliable and so forth. So we're as I say, we keep on looking at this problem and improving things. But we've seen a lot of, especially then going back to the audit log as well, that because you have democratized it, everybody can pitch in and make changes. So the second thing, or no, the fourth thing, we've titled Smart Inventory. We've had we had a presentation last year at the Eurogard Congress in Europe, where we had done some analytics with Kew Gardens, University of Leiden, and Hortis in Amsterdam, looking at their collection over time, how it had changed. And it was funny, we sort of saw, we created some graphs, and there was a drop in quality. And it turned out that they actually did inventory. So it looks like everything got worse, but it actually got better because it got more accurate. And these kind of things. And then we had this discussion saying, well, if we have those many plants and you want to sort of check every plant at a certain interval. And some people, if you have an arboretum, you might have every 3 years or something. But then they look at the maths and they realize it's impossible. You can't do that with the amount of staff we have to check all those plants at those intervals. And that's when we get back into what plants are important and which plants are not, and help you to sort of guide and make sure you then check those plants that are really valuable, or you think they need to be looked after because there's something wrong with them. You know, an oak that's been in the garden for 30 years versus a freshly planted herbaceous. You know, there's a very different way of looking at it. So we, in Hortis, we've done one thing already, which is like a follow-up cycle to each plant, so that you can, that can inform the other staff members on what plants should be checked up at what interval. That's one first step, where we will keep on improving those kind of ideas, so that you can be more focused on where it matters. One thing we're going to do, I think very likely, is also using mapping for that, to show a heat map. So you can send out people, go out and look at the map and see where you need it the most. And then you can see which plants haven't been checked for a long time. Those kind of things is really sort of interesting, or has great potential. So this is from Hortis, where you can, we call it an observation, so you can just check to see or record the condition of the plant, etc. And then this is more of a, not so much about the system, but trying to think about how you do everything, really. What kind of tools do you use? Things change all the time, you know, technology, but also knowledge about record keeping and everything else. So yeah, that's like, so we have, so this is something I think we have like an engineering team. We have something called retrospectives that we do every 2 weeks, which is really helpful for us. And I think that's kind of technique that might be interesting for botanic gardens as well, or any institution. It's more like you go through every 2 weeks to see what things go well and what things doesn't go well, and then you end up with a list of things, and then you have actions. These things need to be improved, and then you keep on doing that at cyclical levels, and you keep on improving. And the continuous improvement story is also reflected on how we work, and this is really another fantastic part of our platform, is that we can deploy a new version of Hortis in less than 10 minutes to the whole global infrastructure. So we have Hortis data in Hortis is running on 4 regions now: Australia, New Zealand, continental Europe, North America. And that means that when we send a new version of Hortis, it's out to everybody, and everybody runs the same version. And it's even secure to that aspect that you can't really not run the latest version. So it's so if you go to our website, you will see the release notes and about the changes. So sometimes we have several changes a week, but they're very subtle in that we don't. You know the dread when you come in and suddenly everything is changed, like somebody reorganized all your furniture in the sitting room or something. It isn't like that. It's very, very subtle, and but have a look there, and then you'll see. So
you can integrate the new version, whatever that is, with the existing one without minimal service.
Yeah. We've the biggest test we did was actually to have, as we had live, when we introduced what we talked about, the audit log. It's very complicated. We did that live. Nobody noticed anything, nothing, no problems anywhere. And then we gradually just rolled it out, and suddenly we switched it on, and there it was. So we have great experience in doing that for 15, 16 months without any problems. Or if there are any problems, there have been some minor bugs for sure, but they are, then we can fix it within, we can basically fix it within hours, and not, oh yeah, it will be rolled out in the next release, which we plan to ship in October. It's a very different sort of ball game. And then of course, the cost of us running this operation is very different as well. I think this, that's a big topic about managing software when you have 100 clients with different versions of the product. It's quite a nightmare. So yeah.
I was going to say that this is where also talking with gardens really valuable for us. Not only effective Hortis users, but existing Hortis users. If they have feedback for us, we take that really seriously, and it's what drives us to build great products. Because we're not building this for us. We don't have a garden, or virtual one, I suppose, but we want to make it as useful as possible for.
Yep. What's the term? We want you to become heroes. That's what. So if we can do that, that's what really would drive us. So this slide, I think, is quite helpful for what is healthy plant records. When can you start relying on it and feel like, okay, we now know what we have in our collection, and we can sort of use it for more than just having a list of plants. So I'm going to start with this one, and then I'm going to end with that one as well. Inventory gap, I think, is probably one of the most fundamental things that many gardens struggle with. And if that gap is huge or big, then you have problems of relying. You might have lots of plants that in your records that are dead, and you might have new plants that are not in there, and then you have a gap that makes it very hard. So this is where we have been working now for the last year to make it really easy, or easier, for gardens to reduce that gap. So it's on the mobile, you can go in and you can keep on changing your records as you operate. The next step is we do provenance. So where did this plant come from? If that data is inaccurate, it can be what we say, what we call it, a serious sort of I'm not sure I call it a problem, but if you have plant material that has conservation or research, theoretical research potential, and you forgot to record the coordinates, for example, you sort of that value of that plant material suddenly drops drastically. So that's the kind of thing we want to make it easy for you to track that. And it was a very good talk. I don't know if some of you went to the meta collection talk yesterday, where there were some good examples of plant species that we thought were safe. And then there was a cycad that was there was a sort of a pest that basically wiped out a huge amount of them in the wild. And suddenly you had something that you thought was, oh, it's a cycad, it's nice, but suddenly it is actually of huge importance. So being able to record this is of course important to do that accurately. Plant identification. So you might have plants in your collection. I have not got good numbers, but there's been a lot of research that is quite common in botanic gardens that quite a large percentage is misidentified. It's just difficult, and having kind of a good idea about the level of skills that have been put into the identification, so you can actually quantify this has been identified by taxonomists and this is not. So again, going back to the initial point, those plants that are important to your mission, you will put an effort to make sure that the identification is correct. Whereas those plants that are less important, whether it's that daffodil or that daffodil, it's not really that important. And this is something we're really going to work on further down the line to create collaborative tools, because certain groups are very hard to identify. There are specialists out there that could help. So being able to collaborate and help you to enhance your quality of that aspect could be tremendously impactful. We haven't started that yet. So our focus is there now, but we have done quite a bit there. But this is where we are very excited because it's cloud-based. There's opportunities to get those things in. And the last part is taxonomy. Have you spelled your names correctly, or are they, not correctly at all? Like it's a firm, that's fine. I mean, you may not know more than that. That's not a problem. But the fact that you have linked it to, if it's correctly spelled, then it has potential to be utilized beyond your own institution, and that can be very useful. This is also something we're really going to work on, or in the next few weeks, we're going to, or probably June, July, we're going to start the first step of integrating with Plants of the World Online, so that you get the higher ranks automatically, genius and above. And further down, if anybody's very interested in this topic, we have quite a long paper written about our plans related to this. But the gist of it is that you get we're going to start with Plants of the World Online, might use other taxonomic resources as well, where you have that as an opinion. So when you type a name, you get it spell checked for you. And of course, you get other metadata with that. So when we get further down the line, we will add IUCN rating, for example. Some of you might try to maintain that. It's quite a big job. So if we can do that as a shared resource, then you save a tremendous amount of effort, and you get your level of accuracy will improve as well. So obviously, the taxonomy from Plants of the Line is species, so cultivars, etc., is still a challenge. Yeah. Yeah, I think we definitely would, if there are some good cultivar resources out there that we hopefully could look at integrating with, but we will first step is the species, and that covers, that's 400,000 names. Well, 400 accepted names, 1.5 million names, and that's quite cool as well. We done tests with this cloud product. It doesn't matter, but if you had this as like on your laptop and you're going to munch around with almost 2 million records to find a name, it's very different. So that's very exciting. So that's the story there. And if you get all those four things checked off, suddenly you have something you can really rely on. And we want all those four things to be made, be easy for you. And as I say, this is what we've done now. We're sort of working hard here, and this is probably the next phase after that again. So these bits just summarize what we've gone through here now. And I'm very curious to hear if we missed something. That's let's see if so mission-driven record keeping. Think about why you have plants in your collection in the first place. And it's actually, we've seen that before, where people actually come to the realization that we shouldn't have these plants because there's no purpose. And the other side to that coin is, if you go back now, when you saw about healthy plant records, if you have plant records or plants that are mission driven, but the record data is really poor, then you might consider to recycle, get the new species or new sort of plants coming in with more accurate and more better data. Democratize record keeping, get everybody involved with airbag and safety belt and everything, so you can sort of pull back if things go bananas. And simplify workflows is a bit more of a long-term game maybe, but there's certain things you can already do with Hortis because you can use it on any device. The smart inventorying, as we mentioned, help you to sort of speed up in one way, but focus where it's most important, so you don't what should I say, spend time on things that are less important. Continuous improvement, and then this healthy plant records. Did we miss anything? Any other have some really good tips?
Questions?
Yes, questions? That's good.
So is there a calendar within Hortis that would flag, hey, you need to sow seed for this, or you need to take cuttings of this week, you know, in February, so that it's ready to go for planting?
Yeah.
Into the collection.
Not now, at least not yet. So one thing we're trying to think of carefully here is we had a very good discussion with somebody else about risk assessment, and there's all these kind of what should I say, workflows in gardens that are handled with other products very well. There's a lot of scheduling tools, so we're a bit on the fence whether we should look at integrating with good scheduling tools instead of putting it in Hortis, because you probably have other things going on as well, not just. So that's we're on the fence there, but theoretically the data is there, so you could do something like that.
Could that be something such as you talked about, hey, it's time to go hit this tree? Could that be the flag?
Yeah.
That is the-
Definitely, yeah. So that goes back to the kind of discussions we have with you is we look at what the kind of things you want to achieve, and then we look at ways to resolve those challenges. And that some of them we try to maybe it makes sense to put it in the tool, but also to make it possible in one way or another. So that's the best answer I can give now. But again, we're a bit sort of conservative of sort of putting in everything in there, and that's the beauty of cloud as well. I mean, some of you might use other cloud products, and you see that a lot of them have integration with, you know, one thing, for example, Google Sheets or all those kind of other products that helps you to, that we can have a focused product. Yes.
This is recorded. Yeah, so I can have a staff member listen to this.
Yeah, I hope the recording goes well.
How will they access that?
So what we'll do is, if you subscribe to the next one, there you go. That's the answer. If you subscribe to, so we'll subscribe to our newsletter, then we'll send out a link to everybody where that recording is. So we have our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to that as well, but it's probably easier to do that because typically what we do is we write a small summary and in relation to the recording and the video. So
There's also an iPad that's going around. So and I'll set up my laptop as well in the exit. So if you want to keep in touch, it'd be great to just put in your details. I'll set that up now, but there's an iPad, hopefully. Should be making it around.
yeah.
Data points that I didn't see today, especially on healthy plant records, are having had made a very good document or taken a photograph.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point in that, and that's when we had these workshops with last year, we realized that the future is probably like a data health monitor in Hortis, but that's also very much related to the institution. So if you think if vouchering is a very important part of or if you do vouchering, if you don't, then you can't sort of use that as a metric. But that's a good point. There's all these kind of what we did was, is the plant mapped? That is one point up. Do you have photograph? That's two. And then is it identified by a taxonomist? So you basically increase the quality record, quality score, you might say. And yeah, that's definitely a good point. Yeah.
Do an analytic, like get a report that says all of these members of your collection verified.
Not just yet, but it's definitely something we will. That makes a lot of sense. And when we start delving into that sort of chapter in a bit more detail. Yeah. Please, yeah.
So it might make some people nervous to just
ship all your data onto a cloud.
Yeah.
Is there an option to like dump the data locally, weekly, or monthly?
It's a very good question. So you have it's almost like do we have time for? Well, I'm just going to show you very quickly when you this. Oops, if I'm now in Hortis here, and if I go to the lists, and here's the list of all my plants, for example, and I can do Quercus, and then I can go here and download that as a CSV file. So it's very straightforward in that respect. What I think is important to think about as well is with the Species 360 being a non-profit for 5 decades, I think we'll be around for quite a long time. So and the amount of effort, if anybody is uncertain, look at the security. There's on the bottom of hortis.com, there's a link to our security page. Share that with any advisors or people you want to sort of get, is this a good thing or not? And we're very happy to have those dialogues to make sure you really feel confident. When it comes to backups here, there's so much going on there. We're running what is called continuous backup on the back end. So it's like that runs for 7 days, and then we have other backups on top of that. And we've never had to use it anywhere, but it's still there in case something cataclysmic happens. So yeah, I think there was a question far down there. Yeah. Yeah.
So I know you and I were talking about field maps, as Reese field maps, which is what our ground, everybody's grounds, all the landscape crew is using. And I think my question would be is if I could collect the data on Hortis, and that would get pushed eventually to GIS Pro, because then that in turn gets pushed out to the entire planning, design, and construction team, because they need to know where everything is versus everybody, they just want to know where the plant material is mapped and where it's at. So I'm just making sure that from Hortis, it gets we can export it to GIS Pro, and then it further goes into CAD and everybody else.
Yeah, so for those who, that was the one recording, that's okay. We have another one. So from a technical point of view, Hortis all the way at the lowest level is actually spatial aware. If for those who know what that means in the GIS term, it means that we're recording these points as spatial data. So theoretically, it's not too difficult for us to create this as a service that could be plugged into something like ArcGIS or Quantum GIS. We haven't done that yet. This map, for example, just on the other side of that, this map is of Hortis in Amsterdam, and here we have OpenStreetMap overlaid with an ArcGIS map, this is in a browser, so you can see how smooth that is. It's very easy to use, and yeah. So our strategy is basically to think about your plant records as like four dimensions. And the spatial one, being able to work in the map all day long is what we want to achieve, if you want to. And then you have the list, so you can have your alphabetic lists, and if that's your thing, you can do that. And the third thing is photographs. If you want a CEO, that's something we've done so much about, but we really, as you can see here, we put the photos really prominently when you click on something. And the last part is the longitudinality. I love that word. It's basically being able to look at your collection over time. We haven't done, I would love to see doing a slider here and see what you had 2 weeks ago or whatever. So, but that's not there. I know we're running out of time, so I think be respectful of that. But we have
some very topical T-shirts. You get points if you know who the person is on the T-shirt. So do grab a T-shirt on your way out, and if the iPad is somewhere, do let's share details. Yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe we should show
yeah.
the T-shirt. So can anybody recognize this gentleman? Yes. So he was 23 years old, I think, and he's picking some. I'm not sure what this is. Flowers, the flowers. Yeah. Anyway, and then on the back, You have the print of the first edition of the, yeah. So so yeah. We are in the exhibit today and tomorrow, so if you want to have a more closer look at the demo, please come and say hello. Really great to see you all. Thanks for coming.